Radio Split Ranch.
Hello and welcome once again to Radio Split Ranch, a monthly visit with the Capital Region's great radio personalities of the past and sometimes present. I'm Warren Garling when I'm not on the radio. And you're listening to theme music written and played by my good friend and sometimes lunch buddy, Drew Jacobs. So this would be a great time to plug his newest CD, Christmas Ball Busting, the perfect gift for your loved ones this Christmas, as long as they understand that not a shred of evidence exists in favor of the idea that life is serious. They'll enjoy such soon-to-be seasonal favorites as Santa Claus is Coming to Rock You, which you may already know if you listen to Dr. Demento on the radio. And don't forget everyone's favorites to be Flat Santa, Bad to the Claus, Climate Change Christmas, and Rudolph's on Steroids. You won't regret breaking your Christmas budget by buying Drew's new release at drewjacobs.com. Good luck. WRKO, WNBC, MTV, KDKA, WYNY, WGY, WGNA. If you recognize any of these call letters, you'll want to hear what our next guest has to say about working at these high-profile outlets. He's made stops at all these recognizable addresses and then some, and ended up settling here in the 518, we're happy to say. That's why we were able to entice him to stop by the Radio Split Ranch on a recent Saturday afternoon, a rainy one at that. Here's my conversation with Buzz Brindle. I think the first question that comes to mind, Buzz, is where did Buzz come from? Because I know your first name is Ron, so where'd Buzz come from?
I had many on-air names, and my very first one, back when right out of high school in Providence, Rhode Island, was Ronnie Roman and the Roman Empire of Sounds, which was kind of like influenced by the whole doo-wop era kind of mentality.
I was going to say, it almost sounds 50s-ish.
Yeah, exactly. In high school, my homeroom class, there was a kid who was involved in a 1-watt radio station in the Mount Pleasant section of Providence, and it was called WMPA. That's what they call it. It was a pirate radio station.
Sure.
And so they invited me to be part of it, and so that was my name, and I did that. And then
how old are you at this time?
18.
Okay, all right.
And then I went to college. I went to Northeastern University. Was Ron Brindle on the air there, but and then I became a board op. I quit college. I was bored to tears in college.
Oh, okay.
I spent most of my time at the campus radio station.
Well, there you go.
Because I didn't really know what I wanted to be. Well, I did know when I was 13 years old. I remember it was July of 1960. Would be 1960 if I was 13. I was listening to, there was a guy named Dave Sennett, who used to be at WTRY.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave Sennett was a midday guy at WPRO AM in Providence. And I was listening, and they were doing a remote broadcast, supposedly, allegedly, from Rocky Point Park, which was the kind of great escape of Providence.
Okay. Yep.
As far as I knew, it was live. It may not have been, but it sounded like it was. I don't know if they did that type of stuff. You do recreate the illusion later, the theater of mind stuff, but I suspect that it was probably live. But anyhow, I was thinking, that's kind of a cool gig. And I also used to watch a lot of, this is a long way around to where the buzz came from.
That's
okay. I used to watch. Of course, there were all those movies, those black and white movies they used to show on television in the early days that were kind of depicting the Depression era, and the radio people always seemed to be doing very well.
Yeah,
and were accepted by all different strata of society.
Yes, it seemed that way. Yeah,
and so I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. I came from a middle class family in a agricultural community in Rhode Island, but I had aspirations to be more than that, or at least to meet lots of different people, to be accepted by a lot of different people. I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting gig where I could be accepted by the well-to-do and accepted by the common man. So this is an interesting. I kind of like that idea for a profession. So very early on in my life, I decided that's radio broadcasting is where I wanted to work.
That's wild.
And so when I was in college, I got accepted at the radio I didn't get on. I had to audition for 9 months before I got on the air at the college radio station.
Yeah.
They were very exacting. But my sophomore year, I spent 2/3 of my time at the radio station and cut all my classes.
Yeah,
so
yeah. That's basically what happened to me too.
yeah, and it was like, well, okay, this isn't working out, and they held me back.
Wow.
And I was like, I had been on the honor society in high school, but it was like I wasn't making it in college.
Yeah,
And it was like, and I got offered the opportunity to be the overnight board op at WRKO Boston.
Wow.
Which was a union job. It was IBEW. It made good money. I actually was still enrolled in college, so my first class was at 8 a.m. So my notion was I was going to work overnight and then go to the 8 a.m. class.
Oh,
Well,
sure
that
you
didn't
were.
work out
Yeah.
very long.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I eventually quit. And there was a guy named Shadow Stevens, a jockey named Shadow Stevens, who eventually went on to be a TV announcer.
Sure.
Craig Ferguson. Was it Craig Ferguson show?
Well, no,
one of the overnight shows.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he was the announcer, the Ed McMahon version on that show. He was very psychedelic, if you would, and in his approach on the air. And I was inspired by that.
He was doing overnights. Is this?
No, he was.
okay.
He was the 6 to 9 guy at that point.
Okay.
So I had
All
moved
right.
up.
Oh, okay, good.
And in my because I loved being a board op.
Wow.
I love being the union guys didn't appreciate it very much because they didn't want to. They wanted to do production, which meant they hung around and didn't do anything. Yeah. I wanted to be a board op, so I would train shifts with them when I had a production thing. He's like, I'll do that board opping thing. So
Cool.
that was great. I viewed it as kind of a producer kind of job.
Sure. Yeah.
I was influenced by Shadow's approach and the language he used, whatever. And there was also a newscaster on CKLW, J. Paul Huddleston.
Okay. Yeah. I think I remember that name too.
So somehow I decided when I got hired at WICE Providence, my first real professional gig, that I was going to use a different name. So I became S. Brindle Brown. Now, if you've in the service
called you S.
it actually, yes. Actually, there's a JJ Jeffrey who I worked with at WRKO calls me Mr. S to this day, and as does Gil Gross, I think. But I don't know if you're familiar with the term. It's a podcast, so I can say it. Shit, Brindle Brown. Okay. So to me, it was a goof on the name.
Sure.
Yeah. There were other people that didn't quite understand, that didn't get the joke. It's like, why would you call yourself that? Because it's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
I was, 23 years old.
Sure.
I thought it was funny. But I'm just going way off on this one. I got called by WRKO one day. I was working the 9 to midnight shift, I think it was at the time at WIC in Providence, and there was some story that happened in Providence, and they wanted a voicer.
Yes,
they wanted a report.
Sure.
So they called me because they knew I was there, and I did it, and I reported it as S. Brindle Brown, and I was banned from WRK by the news director, who was never let that on again. So, but anyhow, so I was S. Brindle Brown then, and then I was Todd Stevens for a while at a small radio station in Providence, and they gave me that name, and then I went to Washington, D.C., and the general manager wanted me to be Senate. I was doing afternoon drive, and they wanted me to be Senate in session till 7.
Okay. Yeah.
So I became, because I was influenced by Dave Sennett, who had been on the air at WPRO and who used to be at WTRY.
Yeah.
When he wanted me to be Senate SENATE, I became Senate SENNETT.
Smart.
And then I was influenced by Kurt Vonnegut, so I became Kurt Sennett.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
In session till 7.
Jeez.
But, so I did afternoon drive Monday through Friday in Washington, D.C., and then I did weekends, Saturday and Sundays at WYRE Annapolis, because I was a radio geek and I had no life.
Only working 7 days a week? I mean, what's wrong
Precisely.
with you?
And I was Tom Campbell there because that was the jingle they had.
There you go.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Yep. And did that. And then I got, funny thing, I got fired in Washington because the morning guy did a bit. There's a big grocery chain that serves Washington, D.C. called Kroger.
Yeah.
And their advertising, the guy who did their advertising was a former radio guy. And I had actually been to a Christmas party at his house the night before this occurred. But there was a produced spot on the morning show for wholesale fryers.
Okay.
And the morning guy introduced it as an hour word from Chicken Man. All the executives from our station were out of town in Detroit at the time because the company that owned us, Sonderling, had just bought Keener in Detroit. And some rep from the advertising agency, a young lady who didn't have much of a sense of humor apparently, called and wanted the morning guy fired because he introduced it as Chicken Man. I was kind of full of myself and kind of viewed myself as having more authority than I really did from programming.
Okay.
And because I had met the guy, and whatever, I called the agent because I wanted to find out what the problem was. I just
Sure.
he was a radio guy, he understood it, and it was like, he's drawing attention to your spot. Why would that be a problem? Well, I didn't get him, I got her. And she didn't like my attitude.
There you go.
As I tried to explain it. So she called the sales manager and they fired me. It was an after job, so I got severance. A week later, the general manager of their Chicago radio station, WGLD, a gentleman named Charles Manson,
Okay.
yes, had decided they were an album rock format. He was an Elvis fan and decided to, without corporate approval, switch formats to oldies.
Why not?
Why not? So all of a sudden they needed an oldies program director. So they called me.
Okay.
So I was being paid severance and got a new job where they were paying me. And they were flying me back and forth from Washington to Chicago
Whoa.
because I lived in Washington at the time.
Yeah, sure.
So that happened for a while. I thought it was highly amusing.
Have we gotten to Buzz yet?
We haven't got. Well, we're about to get to Buzz because Charles Manson didn't care for me much.
Okay.
And the corporate was kind of like unhappy too because they wanted to come in and change all the disc jockeys' names to generic names.
Okay.
Rick Shaw, things like that.
Oh, boy.
So that they could just replace disc jockeys and not have to.
Oh, sure,
all
yeah,
that stuff,
yeah.
right, And I battled them on that, and that didn't make me popular. So I eventually got fired there, and my former station manager at WNEU in Northeastern in Boston had just gotten a gig as a station manager at this new radio station in Pittsburgh,
Okay.
owned by the Pittsburgh Gazette, WPEZ. And he called me and he wanted me to be program director. So I was like, well, great. Okay, fine. So I went there, moved to Pittsburgh, and he had hired this young 19-year-old kid out of Detroit, Bob Pittman, to be the assistant program director. When I met Pittman and started talking, I realized he knew a heck of a lot more about programming than I did. Because he was an acolyte of a guy named Buzz Bennett, who was the consultant for the radio station across the street, 13Q, which was like the number, like the primary top 40 station in town in Pittsburgh.
Gotcha.
We were also ran FM,
Gotcha.
top 40 radio station. And so I said, you be program director, I'll be assistant program director.
Nice. Yeah.
So, well, it just made sense to me. So he decided he wanted me to be Buzz Bennett on the air. I said, well, I'm sick of being another person. I've been using these fake radio names
Sure.
all the time. Tell you what I'll do. I'll be Buzz B. Brindle.
You had to throw the B in there for the Bennett.
Bennett, right, exactly. And so that's where Buzz came from.
Oh, big
and I figured it would be temporary, and it just stuck.
Yeah, yeah. And by this time, how many years into your career are you?
Let's see. My first WIC was 1969. This was now 1973.
So it took a while for you to
Yeah.
find the identity
Right,
you would
exactly.
hang on to.
Exactly. And then, here we are in the 21st century, and it's
Still
there.
calling you Buzz.
But I wouldn't call. I forbade my family to call me that. Now my stepdaughter does call me that.
Okay.
She still calls me Buzz, but nobody else calls me Buzz.
Yeah.
And because I always tried to keep my on-air persona separate from real life.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I did the same thing.
Yeah,
and pretty much to keep the wife happy. You know, she wanted a separate life than all the disc jockeys hanging around the house and stuff like that. And but when my boy started answering the phone at 5 or 6 or 7, whenever we let the kids start answering the house phone, people were calling for Chris. And there's no Chris in this house. They were hanging up on them, and by this time I'm probably a program director, but they just didn't realize that I was using a different name on the air. Yeah. So it can happen, but I've always known you as Buzz, and I think everybody in this market, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's become it's been a brand that I've exploited.
There you go. So, what I'm excited about with your career, and the reason I really want to talk to you, is that you're one of those guys that did wind up bouncing around a bit, but you seem to be improving market-wise as you were doing it in many cases. You seem to be going from, or at least,
Yeah, I was lucky.
Mean, you're talking Boston, and you're talking, did you say Pittsburgh a few minutes ago?
Yeah, it was Boston and Providence, and then Providence, and then Washington, D.C., and then Chicago, and then Pittsburgh, and then New York.
Yeah.
So,
whereas mine goes, college in Boston, and then Saratoga Springs, Troy, Albany, back to Troy, Albany. So
it depends on what your ambitions were too.
True.
I mean, how old were you when you got married?
True. When I got married the second time, and she told me she was a twin and she was going to stay in this market, I said, well, then I don't think radio will be the forever thing for me.
See, I didn't get married till I was 44.
Oh wow!
So radio was my wife, if you will.
Exactly.
And so I made that particular career choice. So moving was a lot easier
for you to do. Exactly. Yeah.
And that changed when I eventually, when I've been out of radio for 14 years now.
Sure.
And when I left WGNA, it was like, well, okay, my mother-in-law had just moved. My father-in-law had died. My mother-in-law had just moved to Saratoga to be near us. Our youngest daughter was 13, in middle school. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a good time to move. It didn't seem to me. It didn't seem fair to do that. I couldn't be that self-centered. Mm-hmm. I tried to get gigs. I talked to places about gigs where I would be out of the market during the week and then come back over the weekends, but none of them really worked. And then eventually it was like, let me try something different.
Sure.
I created Brindle Media, which was supposed to be, a hodgepodge of things, voiceover, marketing. I tried to create a business for this back in those particular days. It was becoming a thing for small entrepreneurs, people working from home who had small businesses.
Sure.
I enjoyed, when I was a program director, one of the things I really enjoyed doing was the marketing, the research, and then basically creating a way to connect with listeners.
Yep.
And using those devices, and we did direct mail and whatever. And I thought, well, there was a company called Send Out Cards, which is a multi-level marketing company, but they were mostly about sending birthday cards and whatever. But real estate people were using it to connect with clients and whatever. And I thought, well, this could be something interesting. There were small businesses could use this service because they had a system where you could create mass messages, if you would, customized mass messages.
Gotcha.
But it looked like you could use your signature and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. You could personalize things, and send them out to clients and customers. I thought this one could be very useful to people. I wasn't very good. What I learned was I suck at sales. I learned that pretty easy. Yeah. And also the company just was not interested in really moving in that direction.
Sure.
So that didn't work out well. And so anyhow, yeah, I tried all these different things and eventually moved on from there.
Had to go back to actual work.
I had to go back to, well, but my wife actually became, it
job.
was interesting. My wife became the breadwinner for the family.
Ah, there you go.
Molly,
Yeah.
she got offered a gig with New York Racing Association.
Uh-huh.
So she was living downstate 4 days, Tuesday through Saturday, and then commuting back home and going back. So
okay.
I became Mr. Mom.
Sure.
I raised our teenager, young teenage
terrific,
daughter,
yeah.
which was a great experience. It was a blessing in a lot of ways for me.
Yeah.
It's kind of rough on Molly,
I'd imagine.
and although she enjoys the racing industry and she liked that too, but she didn't care for the commute much. So anyhow, yeah, I mean, you make things work. You make things
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I did when I got let go from GNA
Right.
in '86, early '86, on my son's birthday, actually, 7th birthday.
Perfect.
Yeah. So something I'd always remember
Yeah,
the
of
date.
course.
Yeah. Marie said she says she doesn't remember this, but she said, and this is in the book that I wrote, my memoir. I'll have to ask my mom. I'm thinking of the sequel. I'll have to ask my wife because she said, well, maybe radio doesn't have to be your end all and be all, and that's all I'd ever done for 17 years.
Right.
Since I was a teenager. But she was right. I mean, within 2 or 3 years, I was making 3 times what I had made in radio,
Right.
which wasn't hard to do. The bar was kind of set a little low there, and so I found it very enjoyable to be able to. After about 2 years, I went back part time on the radio,
Right.
and that was enough. That
Right.
kept me, just a few hours a week. Kept the devil fed, and I was fine. But bottom line is there is life outside of radio,
Right.
and you can still have fun with it in many different ways, like you tried to do, with the marketing stuff. Yeah.
And then when I went back to, I got offered the opportunity to do, actually when Joe Riley and Nirav Patel had purchased the Jockey, they offered me the morning job. But I said, if I were, well, A, I didn't want to do it, but B, I had a different concept about how, if I would have been happy to be the program director. But I had a different concept about what that morning person should be. Yeah. And I viewed bringing in, I'm glad Lou Roberts got the gig, but I would have brought in a younger guy who was just starting a family,
Sure.
who did the morning show and then went out and did sales.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that's the old radio way.
That's
But,
true.
it's like, don't pay attention to Albany. That, Albany clients are not going to spend advertising on your radio station. And, focus on your strengths. But anyhow, I turned that down. But then they offered me the opportunity. Chris Martin was doing a Sinatra show on ABY. And then he became ill and he couldn't do it anymore, and they needed somebody to do it. So I came in and I said, okay, I'll voice track, which Joe Riley wasn't really happy about. But I said, voice tracking is an acting job.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
And the whole idea is to make the audience feel that you are there.
Exactly. Yep.
And I know that you have the same philosophy.
Yep.
And so I did a 3 hours on Saturdays, 3 hours on Sundays. And we called it Sinatra and Friends, so I expanded it to be more than just Frank Sinatra music. It could be Natalie Cole and Michael Bublé and even I think it was Zach Brown and Sarah Bareilles.
Really?
Did a song that fit.
Yeah, if it fit format, sure.
But I would spend probably at least 6 hours doing the research, voice tracking the shows for those 6 hours, because I would go in. I provided the music for their system, the selector system, and then I created categories and whatever for the music.
Okay.
Then I had Nirav Patel generate my music logs.
Okay.
So I would know what my music logs were going to be for that weekend.
Good.
And then I would go through and research the various songs, and I had a balance in terms of I had a certain number, maybe 4 live breaks plus talk over things.
Sure.
And I would organize what I call personality bits with information about the songs or whatever it was. And I would create scripts for myself because I'm not very good ad-libber. I don't ad-lib very well, so I work better off a script.
Yeah.
And trying to make it sound like it's ad-libbed.
Sure. Oh, yeah, that's the whole idea. Again, it's acting.
Make it sound real.
Yeah,
And so I would go in on the Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
So Tuesday nights I would go in after work and voice track the
Saturday show.
well, no, actually I would do the both the Saturday and Sunday show, but I would do the kind of the generic bits.
Oh, okay.
The top of the hour ID, there'd be certain liners I would do or whatever it was,
Interesting.
and I'd do
Okay.
that. And then on Thursday I would go in and do the more specific bits that because I knew what was going on the weekend,
Sure.
more about the weather and things like that, and what was coming up. So I could it gave it a little bit more. That was the depth, the depth bits, if you would. So I did that, and that worked out pretty well. The funny thing was that my dad had an aortic aneurysm. He didn't die from that, but he had an aortic aneurysm and almost died from it. I had gone to, I had one of those family doctors who was, I didn't particularly care for that much. It was one of those guys where you went in for an hour and he saw you for 3 minutes and then tried to sell you something. Fortunately, he left the practice and a new young woman took over. And I liked her a lot. And I said to her, you know, my dad had this aortic aneurysm. Shouldn't I be checked out for this? I mean, I was at that point 72, something like that.
And you really
not
had...
72, but 62.
62, okay. But still, that's about the time you have to start
right.
worrying about the heart. Yeah.
So they sent me in for stress tests and whatever, and discovered that I had this 90% blockage.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so I gone to the cardiologist, and he had told me that, and it was like, oh, okay. He said, no, you need to get. This was a Thursday afternoon, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm recording my show that night, and it turns out I had been told by management that they could no longer afford me.
Oh, boy.
So my last show was going to be New Year's weekend of 2016.
Okay.
So I'm in the cardiologist's office on the Thursday before New Year's weekend, and he tells me you've got a 90, and you need to go in now. And I said I can't do that because I've got a show to record.
Yeah,
I've got work that I've got to go. My wife needs to understand some things. Tell you what, I'll go in on Friday. And he's like looking at me like, what are you doing? He's like, no, I feel great. It's just a matter. I'm not going to die on you. Don't worry about it.
Oh, boy.
He looked skeptical, but I was right. So I went in that night to record what could possibly be my last
your
show.
Swan song.
In many different
yes, exactly. Wow.
And
Buzz.
so I got a quadruple bypass surgery that weekend. Wow. I came out of my coma for that on the Sunday. I'm not sure if my show was on the air at the time when I came out of my coma.
Wow.
But
that is some story. That really is something.
Yeah. So that was an interesting my final radio experience.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what a way to go out. Sure. Now, you reminded me of something in my few different incarnations on WTRY. When we started doing voice tracking there, John Gabriel was doing the music. But basically it was making sure the music was, in the library and it would be printed out, as you say, so you knew what was coming up. He would, on Wednesday or Thursday of the week, send me the Saturday and Sunday music logs. I did the same thing like you were doing. And I'm doing it with oldies, obviously.
The show prep.
Yeah, show prep. And that way I knew exactly what songs I was going to have to either go into or out of. Right. And, I wound up saving that stuff. I had a book about an inch and a half thick, a 3-ring binder of all these intros that I'd written over the years. And I would go back and use them a year or two later. Why not? Nobody's going to remember what I
remember
said.
There was a philosophy that back in, it was 1971 or something, Charlie Tuna or somebody, whoever it was, the Jockey, and it was like he would not recycle a bit for 6 months. Okay, and it was like, and later on it was on people don't listen that closely. You can do it every, just move around. In fact, when I was doing the, sadly because of corporate budgeting, it was decided that we were going to eliminate the overnight jock position on WGNA.
Okay.
I was able to save Mike Snyder, who was the overnight guy, for another year because September 11th had happened and he had done a great job of creating truckloads of stuff that people had donated.
Yes.
So based on that, I was able to keep him another year, but eventually they said, no, we've got to cut the job. So I didn't have an overnight person. So I became the overnight person, and I voice tracked it.
Oh, yeah.
And I did what I call the kind of personality things, which I ran at like the 36th break or something like that.
Sure.
And they would call them buzz bits.
Okay,
That's
cool.
what I call them anyway.
Yeah.
They're little things that added a little bit more content,
Sure.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Something that was, either informative or amusing or whatever.
Sure.
Thought-provoking.
Well, here's some good news. According to Time magazine, making love can boost your health, relieve pain, and help keep you healthy. There's a headline. According to this article, sex is a good aerobic exercise which improves your circulation and helps prevent heart attacks. Burns around 200 calories. Releases endorphins which help ease chronic pain like backache, arthritis, and migraines. Makes you less vulnerable to depression. Calms your anxiety, boosts your immunity levels, may help to prevent some forms of cancer, and helps you live longer. Oh, honey.
And I put them in the computer system, and I had them in a rotation.
Okay.
So the one that ran at, say, 12:36 on a Monday night might run again at 1:36 on Tuesday and 2:36 on Wednesday,
Sure.
or whatever, and just
Sure.
rotated it because it was like people don't listen that long.
Exactly.
And they don't pay that much attention anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. They're half listening to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why when people ask, well, how come I'm hearing the same commercials over and over
Right.
again? It's because research has shown that people just aren't picking up any of that information until
You
they've
have to
heard
hear
it
it
about
at least
10
three
times
right.
or something.
At least three times. I mean,
Yeah,
the bit
yeah.
was with weather forecasts is you have to do it 3 times for them to pay attention.
There you
for them
go.
to notice it.
Yep. Yep.
So.
Well, I also learned doing public speaking and educational sort of teaching and that over the years to tell the people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you
Right,
told them. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. and that way, finally, they get it by the end of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you had sent me besides some of the buzz bits, which I'll drop in here. You had sent me an air check of a pretty the one that I was impressed with. Tell me how you wound up in New York City and at WNBC.
Okay. I was, this is another roundabout story here.
That's fine.
But I was at WPEZ, general manager of our stations in Pittsburgh, Charlie Warner, had been hired by NBC to be general manager of WMAQ Chicago.
Okay.
He hired Pittman to be the program director. Pittman offered me the assistant program director job out there, but I decided to stay in Pittsburgh and be the program director of WPEZ.
Okay.
The new general manager came over from KQV, and he fired the guy who had hired me, Dick Booth, the guy that I had gone to college with, and brought in another guy. And the other guy and I didn't work out.
Yeah.
So
Happens.
he was going to fire me. I happened to be friends with a guy named Dennis Waters, who was the program director of 13Q across the street.
Yeah.
And he had just been made program director, so he had been doing middays, and he needed a new midday jock. So he hired me. So I went from program director to midday guy at 13Q with no management responsibilities and doubled my salary.
Whoa.
Which didn't break my heart. Lo and behold, a year later, Cecil Heftel, who was a congressman and married to the heir of the Dole Pineapple fortune and owned 13Q, sold his broadcasting company to Nationwide Insurance, and they fired the general manager and brought over the guy from WPEZ, who was my former general manager.
Of course.
So buzz was gone pretty soon after that.
Yeah.
I was friends with the program director of KDKA, and he needed a summer swing shift person, so he hired me. So I went from 13Q to KDKA, which wasn't a bad thing.
Not at all.
And then Pittman got hired in New York at WNBC.
Right. WNBC.
And so I was out of work. I was my stint at KDKA was up. I moved back home to Rhode Island with my parents. I was 30. My dad said, "Well, maybe it's time for you to get a real job." I had been a program. It was like I've been a program director in major markets. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, this is my career. What are you talking about? Get a real job.
Yeah. But of course, they don't understand that this is the business.
Right.
That if you don't get fired, then you were doing something wrong.
Well, he was in insurance, and he was in a more traditional business.
Okay.
Yep. So anyhow, I was getting really depressed, and I had been, I was flown down to Charlotte, North Carolina to interview for a job, but I really didn't want to be there. And I got offered a job at WPGC in Washington to be a scab, and I didn't want to do that.
Oh, boy.
Because they were having a strike. And so WPRO FM in Providence, which was by then like the major top 40 station in Providence, was looking for an afternoon drive guy. I applied for that, but didn't get it. They offered me the overnight show. And my ego was kind of getting in the way.
Yeah.
So like, wait a minute. I've done afternoon drive and I did morning drive in Chicago. I've done, I've been a program director. It's like, and you're offering me the overnight show.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I said, Brindle, get past your ego.
Yeah.
You got nothing. Swallow your pride. Take the gig. So I did.
Cool.
The next day, after my first shift, Pittman calls me from Boston, or from New York, and said, "How'd you like to be the assistant program director of WNBC New York?"
Man, are you kidding me?
So I went to the program director and I said, "I'd love to continue being the overnight guy here,
but wow, that's wild. Once again, proving it's not what you know, it is who you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's happening. I'm Charles McCord, WNBC New York.
The most popular songs. Good morning, Buzz Brindle for Ibis in the morning. Come on, gotta get those limbs moving. It's 7 o'clock at 66 WNBC Radio. 66 WNBC Radio. Good morning. It's 7:04 now. 4 minutes past 7 o'clock. Buzz Brindle for Imus in the morning. Better get up and put your long johns on. It's going to be cold today. 9 degrees right now. Good day for skiing, though. If you're a beginner or you've ever wanted to ski, or if you're an accomplished skier, stay right here. Twice as many chances for you to win complete ski packages from nearby Vernon Valley coming up during the next 20 minutes.
This is Untitled
7:06, 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Thursday morning. Boy, this guy's doing okay. His very first album has got him 4 Grammy Award nominations. Christopher Cross at 66 WNBC. 66 WNBC Radio means twice as many winners every time. Good morning. It's 7:10, 10 minutes past 7 o'clock. Buzz Brindle for Imus in the morning. And if you call number 3 or call number 7 at 212-955-9066, you're going to win. Good luck.
For Valentine's Day.
7767.
7:12, 12 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning. Did you see this lady on Saturday Night Live? Aretha Franklin, Lady Soul is back. Here's United Together at 66 WNBC.
And then, later on, Pittman left and went to this new cable channel, which we didn't know what it was all about.
Yeah. And whatever happened to that?
Yeah, good question. I was teaching now this is, once again, the irony of my particular life. I was a college dropout. But there was a guy who was, he came in, I don't know why he was at the radio station, but he was a nice old guy. But he was teaching radio communications at NYU, New York University. But he was teaching like Eddie Cantor, old radio show type stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And this was 1979.
Okay.
So he was, I don't know, anyhow, he encouraged me to apply for a gig. So I became an adjunct professor at
the guy without the degree.
With the guy without the degree at New York University, teaching basically radio.
Yeah.
They had a campus radio station. One of my students was a girl named Martha Quinn.
I remember that name.
And Martha also became one of our interns at WNBC.
Wow.
So one day, Pittman calls me, or I called him, or something. Anyhow, we were on the phone together, and he was explaining to me. But I was asking him, "What is this MTV thing?" And he was telling me, "Well, I got a problem because Meg Griffin, who worked at WNEW-FM, had been hired to be the overnight VJ at MTV.
Okay.
She decided she didn't want to do it, so they were looking for somebody. Martha, who had been a DJ on the campus radio station and also had done she had done a McDonald's national TV spot, so she was an actress too, and she reminded me very much of another female disc jockey I knew, who was the first female disc jockey I ever considered not to be. A lot of female disc jockeys seem to try to sound like guys or take a male attitude.
Right. Yeah.
Ellie Dillon was the first one I ever heard who just was herself.
Nice. Yeah.
And Martha kind of reminded me of her. So I said, Bob said, I'm looking for somebody. And I said, well, I got this young woman here. And he said, send her over for an audition. I said, Martha, you're going to go for an audition for this new cable channel, MTV. She went and she got the gig.
There you go.
I'm grateful she continues to acknowledge me for that. And then not long afterwards, well, maybe a year later. No, it was the same year because they signed on in August of 81.
Right.
And then he called me and asked me, there was a guy named Steve Casey, who was the original music director of MTV. But he was offered the opportunity to go into a consultancy business with a program director named John Sebastian to create Sebastian Casey Consultants.
Yeah.
And he asked me what my opinion was. I said, "Should I do that?"
Yeah.
So he left, and there was an opening. So Pittman called me and said, "Well, do you want the job?"
Wow.
So I said, "Sure."
So once again, right place, right time.
That's right.
And
yeah,
the people
exactly. So that's how I ended up at MTV. I have to say, in radio, whenever I woke up in the morning, I couldn't wait to get to work.
Okay.
MTV was a great job and a great ego trip in a lot of ways, and a great showcase, if you will.
And you're making history.
Yeah, right. Stuff. But I never got up in the morning saying, I can't wait to get to work. I didn't have the same passion for it.
Yeah, sure.
Which was interesting. So after a while, it was like, I wasn't a TV person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked radio because radio was an industry where you could wake up in the morning, have an idea, go in and get it done, and you didn't have to rely on other people to do it.
Sure.
Television, I viewed as a committee.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, yeah. I actually, after doing some local TV, mostly public broadcasting, as I was still on the radio, I learned that the mistakes that I would make myself as a board op, combination announcer and board op, I had complete control over. Now there were people, when you're on TV, that can make you look good or bad, depending, on their mood that day as well. I made sure after I learned that little nugget that I was friends with all the cameramen and friends with the director in the booth, and make sure that you kept them on your good side, because there are many different ways they can make you look bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember there was some concert Linda Ronstadt did at Radio City Music Hall, and she annoyed the stage crew, and they did stuff to make her look bad.
There you go. Yeah, it can happen. Yeah. But you're right. It is very different when you're a board op and doing combo work in radio, because it's all under your control, which is why I used to love saying whenever I'd mess up more than once or twice in a break, I'd say, is it too late to call in sick? Because it was all on me.
Right.
I wasn't making a mistake. Now, but you when you started out and were doing board op work, I mean, you're in the same kind of position. You could make that person look good or bad depending on how you felt about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
I always felt responsible for not making. I mean, I would never have intentionally made a mistake.
Right.
Because I felt that my job was to make them look, or to make I always viewed the radio station as the most important thing.
Sure.
That sometimes got me in trouble with staff as I moved up and was program director.
Yep.
Because it was like, it's in the radio station represents something to the listeners.
Exactly.
And we're in service to the listeners.
Yep.
And the listeners have this perception because they've chosen to listen to this radio station.
Yeah.
And to be, I mean, these are the people who listen all the time, not people who just kind of found you because of a scan button, but people who have made you part of their family, if you will.
Exactly.
And we have a responsibility to them, and there is a certain expectation.
Yes.
For the radio station, and that's kind of the way I always viewed it, because I was one of those people.
Sure.
That's how I got sucked into it.
Exactly. You were a fan.
I mean, I used to think
listen.
before I got on the radio, I thought that they all lived in the same house together and they were all best friends. Got together in the kitchen and hung out.
I always thought they came from these beautiful grand palaces that you would work in, know.
Exactly.
And then I saw my first radio station at 11, and I said, "Whoa, wait a minute! This is not what I expected," you know. But you got used to that.
Oh yeah.
No, the radio station had to come first. I made the transition from disc jockey to disc jockey / program director.
Right.
And in order to, hopefully get the confidence of the folks that I was working alongside, but now had to work a little bit above and kind of give them direction, the only thing I changed was I started wearing a tie, and I just said, I guess I'm sort of management now, so at least I'll wear something that represents that, this guy's a little different from everybody else here because he's got some decision making.
Although you're going to run into problems with that because when you're that's kind of a standard issue when somebody moves from the ranks up into management, people start attributing certain attitudes that you don't necessarily have, but they presume you have.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was kind of like, I kind of made the analogy to when Bruce Springsteen made it to the covers of Time Magazine and Newsweek back in 1977. All of a sudden, he was, too big for his britches.
Yeah,
and a certain music aficionados kind of dismissed him because he had gone mainstream. He'd sold out,
and it couldn't be further from the truth.
Of course
obviously.
not. That's what happens. I got yelled at once when I was at NBC. Scotty Brink, who's a friend of mine, but Scotty was our morning guy, and I walked into the studio wearing a tie because I was filling in for the midday guy, and he yelled at me for wearing a tie.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah, because he viewed that as selling out. I was this ties are not allowed in the studio. That's a suit thing. It's like, what are you talking about?
That's good.
But, yeah, it was funny.
So where'd things go from MTV? How long were you there?
I was there from Pearl Harbor Day, 1981, December 7th.
Okay.
I was kind of amused. I kind of relate to these disaster days.
Okay.
And I left Labor Day of 1985.
All right.
And then it was like I had decided I was going to become a consultant. And I was trying to be a consultant. It was interesting with the music video business because when MTV was on the air, the first 2 years MTV was on the air, the music industry didn't take it seriously.
Certainly.
Because it wasn't available in New York or Los Angeles.
True.
So you could get up here in Albany.
Yep.
You could get it in a lot of, you could get it in, other countries.
Sure.
Whatever. But so most of our product was either from England or Australia.
Makes sense.
And those videos were a lot more artistically interesting. When America's record industry finally decided to invest in videos, they were much more literal.
Yes.
So he opened the door, and you have to show somebody opening the door.
Exactly.
And it was like, and we had groups like, everybody had to have, and of course Michael Jackson created this too when Billie Jean became a big thing and Beat It and whatever, and Thriller. But everybody all of a sudden had to have a video.
Yeah.
And you had groups like, who were great visual performers who could pull off a video. Mm-hmm. But then you had kind of generic groups like a Foreigner or a Toto who weren't high-profile personalities, made great music.
Sure.
But weren't necessarily interesting to watch.
Right.
And, they made videos with these people. I mean, it's like, This is boring.
Yeah. Sometimes they became video for video's sake.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the whole and we had discovered that, because always with the controversy, is it the song, is it the video, whatever.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, because my department, I was in charge of the music research at MTV. We did like radio call out, but we did it nationally. But we came up with the question, and actually this came from a response we had from a respondent. They said, I've seen the song. And it was like, okay, have you seen the song? And so that incorporated the visual and the audio element. Yeah. And it tracked well for us.
Sure.
I decided that I was going to try to become a consultant to the music industry to help them to create videos that were more true to what to be more effective. Because
Sure.
But what it all came down to was, well, what colors do we have to use to put it in power rotation to MTV? It's like, that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Plus, I was also kind of amazed initially when I got at MTV that the record industry didn't view videos as a separate product. They viewed it as a commercial.
Yeah.
It was like, wait a minute. Music started out as live, troubadours,
True.
And then you went to concerts, live concerts. Then eventually you went to records. Now you've got a video, which is an entirely separate entity that you can package and sell.
It's true.
Well, no, they're just commercials. What are you, nuts?
Yeah, exactly.
They finally figured that out, but it took them a while. So it's like, create videos that people are going to want to own if you're going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But
well, that seemed like a natural next step, but it didn't really pan out.
Once again, I suck at sales, and I just, it's like, nah, I just can't do this. And then I tried to be a radio consultant, and I wasn't very good at that either, because it's like, why should we hire you when we have these established consultants that are out there? It's like, well, you're absolutely right. Okay, so, why would you do that? So that didn't work out. And then I got offered the gig at I was doing swing shift work at WYNY, the FM sister station of WNBC. And I was also doing a syndicated show for Dick Clark's company called Hot Rocks, which was I wasn't very good at it. I was trying to do my Casey Kasem impression, and I was not. It wasn't good. And plus, they would say we're in the Boston market, but they were actually on Cape Cod. It was like there was no. The affiliates were. Yeah. But I did that, and I got money for it. I got paid. Sure. It was like, that was nice. And I was doing the swing shift at YNY, and then Dennis Israel, who had been at NBC and had also taught at NYU, was aware of me. I think some of my students were also in his classes, so he was aware of me. And somehow we got connected. And he had WGY. He purchased WGY.
Yep.
He was planning on building a radio group, because this was in the mid to late 1980s. And so he offered. I had wanted to get back to New England, but couldn't seem to find a gig in New England. I viewed this area as kind of upstate or the capital region as kind of New England in a lot of ways. It was more like New England than it is downstate.
True. Yeah.
In attitude and whatever, and topography, So the idea was I was going to become program director at WGY, and then eventually I would be, when he bought radio stations in New England, I would become a general manager at one of the New England stations.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how I ended up here.
Well, we had the disappearing man here with us. I came back from my odyssey through the West, and he came back to find out all the weight he'd lost. Buzz Brindle. But he's just fading away. Looks great. He looks really great. He's lost the weight. And I can't believe how fast he's taken it off and remained so healthy. Buzz, you look great.
Thank you, sir. I'm disappearing, huh?
Disappearing.
You look pretty good yourself, Harry. You got this tan. You have this. You're like a kid.
Yeah, I feel like a kid.
You look like you're about 16.
Oh, Buzz, I really haven't told you how great you do look. Not really, my goodness. Wow.
So you get Nutrisystem's really helped.
Oh, that's great.
It's amazing. I've lost 3 inches of my waist. I've reached my goal of 190 pounds now.
Gee.
And so now we're going into the maintenance phase. See, with Nutrisystem, they prevent you from getting into the yo-yo effect. What happens with a lot of situations when people go on diets is they lose a lot of weight, and then they just gain it all back again because they don't have the discipline and they don't have the information they need in order to modify their behavior. With Nutrisystem, they have trained professionals that help you with your nutrition and also to help you to set goals, to understand what things cause you to eat, and they help you to get through in order to keep that weight off and to lead a healthy lifestyle.
Well, that's terrific.
Yeah.
It's surely done well for you. I would think you have to buy a whole new wardrobe yet?
Yeah, I'm actually going to rent out space in these clothes.
You really will have to tighten things up, won't you?
Yeah, well, the tailors are really going to enjoy me.
The tailors are going to be glad to
make a
see
lot of
you.
money on me.
They're going to see you coming in here. Now, do you feel you look so young again? Do you think you'll let your hair grow longer, grow a beard?
Well, we have to work on that next. I don't know if Nutrisystem has a program for growing hair back.
I
Although it's interesting
no,
because
I didn't
people
say anything about that.
people think I have more hair now because my head shrunk, and it's not just because my ego, you know. If you want to join me this summer and lose a little weight, call Nutrisystem. There are 5 convenient Nutrisystem locations in the Albany area. 458-2209 is the number. Nutrisystem. They succeed where diets fail you.
Well, it sure has done you well, Buzz. You look good.
Then we actually, at one point, a group of us, Dennis decided that there was I can't remember the call letters now, in Ticonderoga, AM and FM in Ticonderoga, New York. That served, and it had great signal. It was up on the mountain at Ticonderoga.
Okay.
And it served the valley from Middlebury, from Rutland, Rutland up to, which is pretty sad, Burlington.
Yep.
And that whole area.
Yeah.
So many of us invested in that station, and I was kind of like in charge of programming, whatever.
Gotcha.
We actually had better numbers than the Eric Strauss owned the station in Middlebury, Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
We had better numbers in Middlebury than their station did. But the one thing that I should have realized as a New Englander was that New Englanders hate New Yorkers.
That's true.
And so the local businesses would not buy time.
There you go.
Even though we had the results.
Sure.
We actually opened a sales office in Middlebury. I was trying to convince management. I'm not sure if this was legal at the time or if it just became legal, to move our studios over to Middlebury and shoot the signal up to the transmitter up in the tower.
Yeah, why not?
There was some type of difficulty in doing that. I don't know why, but it seemed to make sense to me to do that kind of thing. If the issue was we were a New York radio station, then let's become a Vermont radio station.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that we kind of lost our shirt on that one. And then Dennis bought stations in New Hampshire, Concord, New Hampshire, and I'm not sure it was the economy or whatever. This was, I think the economy started to tank or whatever it was. But anyhow, they started losing money. GY was still making money, but it was all going to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
The company, so the corporation was going bankrupt, and so Dennis got booted out by his partners, or he left. I'm not sure which, but anyhow, the partners were bankers.
Okay.
And they came in, and they brought in a consultant. And I had met with the head of the company. I said, why pay a consultant $100? A, I've got major market experience.
Sure.
B, what we really need is at WGY is a marketing budget. Give me that money. Don't pay the consultant. Give me the marketing budget. Now they wanted because they want management guys want somebody that they can well, they're an expert. It's like
there you go.
And if you're part of it, you're not an expert anymore. It's that who wants to be a member of a family that would have you as a member, right? Or a group
exactly.
Member, that whole thing.
Yeah. That's Groucho Marx.
I always explain it like. You're brilliant until they hire you, and all of a sudden you became stupid overnight. I don't know why that happens, but it always happens.
It's true.
And so he came in. He was moving it more towards what became conservative radio, talk radio.
Okay.
And eventually I was tied in. Chloe Brothers and her husband Andy had kind of taken over as general manager and chief financial officer of the company. I was affiliated with them in corporate's mind. I mean, I liked them too, and I was psychologically affiliated with them too, and so we all got fired. So then I was out of work and it was like, okay. And then ROW got to Jim Morrell bought WROW, AM and FM. And I persuaded John Kelly to hire me. That was an interesting process because they hired me in the summer of 94. 93, summer of 93. I got fired in, Christmas of 92, whatever. So I was going to work for 6 months and whatever. Got hired. And so I had all this time to put together, to do research about, because WROW and Molly, my wife, worked at WROW as the FM as the promotion director.
Okay.
They were really, Jake Russell, who was the general manager, was very concerned about moving to more of a current AC kind of format.
Okay.
And they were just perceived in the market as kind of old-fashioned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So they had 12-plus numbers, but they couldn't get the 2554 numbers.
That's true.
So I went in with the idea of making a more modern AC station. And so I got to design the logo, which they still use.
Whoa.
I designed that logo in 1980 or 1993.
Okay.
And it's still used today. And I got to do research about the colors. I worked with a couple of women over at Sienna to find out. It was interesting just to, I really enjoyed doing the research.
Cool. Yeah.
And then I was only allowed to keep 2 members of the staff from the entire staff. So I kept, after, considering it, they were all, all nice people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But it was like so Joe Condon.
Absolutely.
And then Joe Myers was the music director, and I kept Joe. I hired Chuck Taylor and Diane Donato because I wanted to have, and the notion was, I decided the target was women who either were management or aspired to be in management. The standard morning show was the dominant male and the female, sidekick.
Sidekick, yeah.
I decided to have the female sidekick, Diane Donato, be a little bit more dominant or equal, at least.
Yeah.
With Chuck Taylor.
Smart.
Because that's the target audience we're going after.
There you go. Yeah.
Although, interestingly enough, when I did some research about disc jockeys, I actually did focus groups and I played air checks of people, but that didn't identify their names. It was just people. And it was interesting. Women didn't seem to like to listen to other women.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. Yeah.
They preferred male voices.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, those are the kind of things I kind of learned as I went along.
Sure.
So we put together B95.5. K-Light was obviously our, they were
target.
Dominant.
Yep.
I was working for a company that didn't believe in having marketing budgets or promotion budgets. Shoestring operations.
Oh,
it's
sure.
like, okay, fine. So I had to find ways to promote the radio station. Paul Bendat, who was owner of K-Light, I had actually, they were looking for a program director at one point before I got the B95 job, and I interviewed with him, and he told me I was too old.
Oh, okay.
I drove Paul out of business in 2 years with B95.
Take that.
Yeah, right. Sorry, man, it was a bit malicious on my part.
No.
Payback.
We've all gone through it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so at one point, I did a thing where I bought an ad. We had trade with the TU. I bought an ad where I somehow encouraged people, K-Light listeners, it was attention K-Light listeners or whatever, and had them send their phone or their phone numbers or fax number, whatever it was, their information to us.
Okay.
To our post office box or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, or fax it. It was the fax machines were
big at that.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I could get a database, basically.
Wow.
Right? Bendat got annoyed. So he started flooding our fax machine, which was illegal
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so we turned them in.
Oh, wow. Jeez, this got a little dirty.
Yeah, got nasty. And of course, John Kelly, who tends to be a little confrontational, loved it.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and then we did things like when Michael Bolton was playing the Pepsi Arena or whatever it was then, actually went down to the parking lot down there and had flyers printed up about tuning in.
Yep.
Being 85. I think because we played Michael Bolton music after the show or something. Just something to create sampling.
Yeah.
You had to do things like that.
You had to.
Yeah.
But that to me was the golden age of radio.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that was done in major markets back in the 60s and into the 70s, and here we are in the 90s, and that's still, radio was still live, and still was personality driven, and of course all of that's just gone by the wayside pretty much.
So it's that was, in many ways I view B95 as the highlight of my career.
Cool. Yeah,
because I got to do so much of that stuff.
Yeah,
I loved GNA was great.
Mm-hmm.
I've really recently. I now listen to. There's a streaming channel, Radio Garden, radiogarden.com, which is it's a Google map of the entire world, and you can go to any radio station. I mean, I listen to radio stations in New Zealand, and in Calgary, and Edmonton. I've been listening to this indigenous radio station in Edmonton.
Wow.
They play country music. They play a lot of old country music. I didn't realize how much old country music I listened to on Top 40 when I was growing up.
There you go. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because there was so much crossover going on back in the early 60s.
50s and early 60s.
Pre-Beatles. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So I listened to that a lot. But why did I get to that?
I'm not sure. You were going from YJB to GNA.
I was going to country. It was country, right. Yeah. Yep. And so I had, when I was at NBC, I briefly was sent to Chicago to WMAQ. Their program director and general manager out there had been caught in some type of scandal and been relieved of their duties, and they needed someone to come out and be program director temporarily while they got their ducks in a row. So I was shipped out there for 3 months to WMAQ Chicago, which was a country station.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So to learn a little bit about country when I was out there. So then when I went to GNA, and Fred Horton had recommended me for the job.
Nice.
And I got to go to GNA and was like, okay. At that particular point in time, my philosophy as a program director or as a manager in anything is like, don't go in and immediately make changes.
Yeah.
Go in, talk to people.
Yeah.
Learn, gather information, review the information, kind of create your assessment of the situation.
Exactly.
And then, if changes need to be made, make them, or don't.
Right.
To me, it was like I was watching what was going on sociologically, if you will. And from the country music standpoint, it seemed to me what was happening was country was becoming more of a suburban format, basically by listening to the music and the content of the music that was out there. I mean, there was that whole bias of it saying, I lost my dog, I shot my, I lost my dog, I love my wife, my truck and all that stuff. And it was that real negative bias towards country.
Yep.
Or disdain, I guess.
Yeah.
But it seemed that it was moving from a more rural influence format to a more suburban influence format.
Absolutely.
With the Tim McGraws and all those folks. And people who grew up with rock.
Yep.
And in this market, we actually did some research, and research actually for the Northeast. A guy named Ed Shane did the research, and what they found was that basically it was, politically it was a third Democrats, a third Republicans, a third Independents.
Wow.
It was it wasn't like the South. It wasn't like other parts of the country.
True.
Which was very conservative in terms of music. So I started to think in terms of really what the format was hot AC country music.
It's your Saturday morning soundtrack. Unbelievable! Buzz Brindle with your favorite country hits on Country 107.7. Come on, let's go move it. WGNA FM.
Country 107.7 WGNA FM with Brad Paisley, who's going to become a daddy next month. There's Brad's tribute, no doubt, to Kimberly. She's everything to me. Good morning. I'm Buzz Brindle at 6:12, 12 minutes past 6 o'clock on this frigid Saturday morning. here at Country 107.7 WGNA FM. But Steve Kepper says it will be warmer than it was yesterday. We'll check his weekend forecast for you momentarily. Hi, good morning. Who's this?
Hi, this is Josh.
Where are you listening to us?
In Waterford.
Hey, Josh, how many members are there on a NASCAR pit crew?
I would say 12.
That's a good guess, but no, it's 7.
All right.
Well, anyhow, hey, just for being our 7th caller, Josh, you scored the CD copy of Lone Star's latest album, Mountains, courtesy of B&A Records, WGNA, okay?
All right, thank you.
Have you stay warm this weekend.
The Capital Region's NASCAR station, Country 107.7 WGNA FM.
That's Brindle, Country 107.7 WGNA FM.
For the latest from Rascal Flatts, from me and my gang, here's Stand. If you just tuned in, I've been telling stories about the fact that I've been down in Nashville. I was down in Nashville about a week and a half ago for a big radio convention. And one of my favorite parts of this convention is sitting on what they call guitar pulls, when a bunch of songwriters get together and tell stories about their songs. Jeffrey Steele, who used to be the lead singer of the group Boy Howdy, is one of the most successful songwriters in Nashville right now. Jeffrey wrote Steve Holy's hit Brand New Girlfriend. He wrote Keith Anderson's Every Time I Hear Your Name, Rascal Flatts' My Wish, Montgomery Gentry's Something to Be Proud of. Just a ton of great hits, just to name a few. So you think life would be great for Jeffrey Steele, but you'd be wrong. And the reason is that 6 weeks ago this weekend, Jeffrey Steele lost his 13-year-old son, Alex, in an ATV accident. And let me tell you, there weren't many dry eyes in the room the other day when Jeffrey Steele sang this song that he had written for Rascal Flatts. And we all listened to that song from the perspective of a parent who had lost a child.
Then we had, everybody had their kind of goofy names. Their, Dollar Bill Early and Gambling Gary and Ryman Ritchie. And it's like, this seems a little corny for this particular point in time, at this particular stage of the game. Yeah. Let's be real people as opposed to cartoon caricatures. Sure. And there was a little resistance to that, but it's like, no, we're going to be real from now on.
Nice.
Then there was some issues with the morning show.
Yeah.
So I had to get a new host for the morning show to work with Richie. Sean McMaster was doing Rhymin' Lovin' and Leavin', or Crying Lovin' and Leavin' at night, 7. Yeah. And I heard a bit that he did at one point. It was just like, whoa. It just connected. I called him and it was like, that was great.
Nice.
So I was still trying to figure out, who can I pair up with Richie? Morning show to make a change. I mean, Gary was still there at the time. And I was taking a shower one morning. It's like, wow. Sean, who tends to be a little edgy, and Richie, the nice guy, a little oil, and this could work.
Could work, yeah.
My notion was, in this market, people didn't grow up with country music. They grew up with Fly 92 or Picks.
True.
So it's like we would be trying to draw listeners in who had grown up with that type of format and attitude. So somewhere between Mason and Sheehan and the Fly 92 morning show. Yeah. And it's like, well, a Sean and Richie show can kind of bridge that gap.
True. Yeah.
And so, but I knew that my experience was that general managers tended not to believe program directors. Yeah. So I had Rusty Walker was our consultant, very well-respected consultant in the country music industry. So Rusty was in, and I said, okay, here's my idea. And he said, okay, so Sean happened to be outside my office smoking a cigarette on and I said, go on, talk to Sean, see if he'd be interested in that. So I sent Rusty out, and he did. And I was like, yeah, he'd be interested. So it's like, okay, you go in and tell Osfeld that this is your idea. Yeah. And so he did, and Bobby bought it. Yeah. And that was the genesis of the Sean and Richie show.
There you go. Yeah. And the beginning of
and the notion was that because the research had shown, Edison research had shown, people would think they disliked country music, but when they became exposed to it, they realized it wasn't what they thought it was. Exactly. And they would develop a taste for it. Yep. So the notion was, okay, let's drive people into new potential listeners into the Sean and Richie show, which is a bit more mainstream. Yep. The music is somewhat incidental to the entertainment factor of the show.
Yeah.
And then move them through to middays and move them through the day parts.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
Smart.
it seemed to work.
Well, you created a real, juggernaut. I mean,
it had already been a juggernaut.
Yeah, well, you're right. But I mean, you added to it, and it led in the ratings for forever and a day.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, we would run into competitive. Sometimes B95 would beat us 25-54, which was kind of interesting. It's like, okay, my old
there
station.
You go.
Sure. I thought it was really kind of funny when the whole Dixie Chicks controversy happened.
Yep.
And Dixie Chicks were a big thing for country radio. So it was like, and I had done some questionnaires to our P1 audience, our primary audience. And it's like, what it came back to was they weren't happy with what the Chicks had done, but they didn't want their music banned.
Yeah.
Corporate, the guy who had been my, when Regent Communications bought us, they came in and said, "You guys are great. You guys have been, number one. Why could we'd be crazy to make changes? By the way, Rusty Walker's no longer a consultant."
Yeah, sounds
standard,
about right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they brought in another guy to be their consultant. Okay. And he's from Arkansas and loved to take me out to lunch and use his Sons of the Confederacy credit card.
Oh, boy.
I was too much of a Yankee for him.
Yeah.
And so he thought we should ban the Dixie Chicks because
a lot of stations did.
Yeah, they did. And it was kind of like the old Beatles thing when John Lennon did the thing about being more popular than Jesus, right?
Yep.
Based on what I would say, it was like no.
Yeah.
So I actually created a George Bush. I was watching CNN or something, and George Bush was asked about the Dixie Chicks, and he said, well, they have their right to their opinion, whatever. Yeah. So I made a promo. It's like President Bush,
there you go. Sure.
And just anything we do to kind of save the whole thing.
President Bush forgives the Dixie Chicks and other critics.
I don't take anything personally. Wonderful thing about free speech and a lot of TV stations is you get a lot of opinions. Some of them are right, and some of them are really wrong. But that's okay. That's what we believe. We believe in free speech. We believe people ought to be able to express their opinion.
The spirit of America lives on Country 107.7 WGNA FM.
But I thought it was funny. We never banned the Dixie Chicks. B95 did.
Interesting.
And I thought, well, that's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a big controversy for the B95 audience.
Exactly. Exactly.
And or maybe for some of them, but certainly nowhere
not
near.
The majority.
This is a popular act.
Yeah.
Popular music. So, it was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, there was some of the interesting stuff. And it was in fact, I just heard "Goodbye Earl" the other day.
Oh God,
I
love that song.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it was
and
like
the video, with Dennis Franz.
The video was great. Yeah, because I remember Channel 6 or one of the TV stations came in to interview me about it, and I was justifying it too. And I'm listening to it and thinking. The other day I was thinking, how can I justify this?
Exactly. Exactly.
But at the time,
but they were no dummies. I mean, that song put them on the map. It really.
Got a lot of attention.
Yeah. So you kind of went out on the top guy, didn't you? I mean, GNA was doing fine when you were done.
Yeah. I just prefer not to be out.
Well, true. Yeah. Well, I felt the same way a couple of years ago.
To be quite honest, I really wouldn't want to be back in the radio industry as it is right now as a program director.
Yeah, same here.
Because it seems to me the radio industry has kind of moved back. I mean, it's not entirely. I mean, there's certainly places around the country where there are local radio stations that are doing very well, and they have a lot of autonomy. But it seems that in many ways, especially with the iHearts and the Cumuluses and the big radio groups, they're kind of moving back to the way it was back in the 20s and 30s when they had the networks.
They were networks
out of Chicago and L.A. and New York,
right?
And it's all very centralized.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that doesn't particularly interest me.
Yeah, same here.
Because I liked the idea of being. I know I got in trouble with Bobby Oswald once because I said it was my radio station, and he said, "Well, it's my radio station." I said, "Well." pardon me, but in the trades, they don't think it's your, when the numbers go down, they don't blame you. They blame me.
True. Yeah.
So it's my radio station.
Yeah.
I have to make the decisions, and I have to take the blame.
That's true.
So, that's the way it goes. But I don't mind that. I liked, because I enjoyed the challenges of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, obviously, we miss having your hand in it, but just about everybody that I'm talking to these days that have been in radio for 40, 50 years, we're pretty much all in the same boat.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I view podcasting as, I'm not one of those people that ever had a home studio because I'm not very good technically either. But I went to a podcasting convention back in 2007 in Boston.
Wow.
And it was great. It reminded me of the old radio convention.
Absolutely.
All these young, enthusiastic people it was just, the energy was terrific.
Yeah.
It was like, how can I become a part of this?
Exactly.
But I never figured out a way to actually make a living at it.
Sure.
I mean, I don't view myself as a host of a podcast.
Okay.
I would love to be in a company where I could somehow recruit people to do podcasts or do the research to find out which would work or what, and
cool.
build from that standpoint. I'm a good behind. As I explained to somebody, explained to several people, but it's like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm the guy behind it. I'm the guy that helps make the entrepreneur's dreams come true.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs I view as people who are great salespeople, not very good at detail work.
Yeah.
I enjoy the behind the scenes detail work stuff.
Cool.
And building it from there.
Yeah.
When I went to I now work for the City of Saratoga Springs Public Safety Department.
Right.
I was hired to be, to work. They actually had two part-time jobs, one for the fire department, one for the police department. They combined them to make it a full-time job. So I worked one day for the police department, the next day for the fire department. For the police department, when I got there, I discovered that their former chief had created a Facebook page and then forgotten that he had been relieved of duty for something, and he had forgotten the password.
Oh, boy.
So for a year and a half, they had a Facebook page that nobody could access to make changes.
Yeah.
So I finally figured that out. It took a while, but I did that. So I took it with their Facebook page, and I created a Twitter account for them, which I didn't have. It's like it was 2000. Well, I've been there 7 years, 2014. You have to have a social media component here.
Yeah.
They didn't really take it that seriously. Mm-hmm. But it was like, so I used, I became their ad hoc social media manager. That's not what they hired me for, but that was the fun part for me.
Yeah.
I viewed it as a way to especially Facebook, to create a sense of community. A lot of pictures of the mounted patrol guys. There was a great one of the guys who was a guy named John Sesselman was one of the patrol officers. He rode King Tut, who's the big horse he's been around for a long time, a true Saratoga character. And there was a picture where John had gone to drive through a Dunkin' Donuts, and there's a picture of this cop on a horse at the drive through a Dunkin' Donuts.
There you go.
Somebody, so I reposted that on Facebook.
Bingo.
John was in England on vacation.
Wow.
And the guy, he was talking to somebody at a bar or something, and the guy said, "Hey, where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Saratoga." He says, "Oh, there's this picture of this guy." And I said, "That was me."
That's me. Wow. How cool is that?
Yeah, that was great.
It really is the World Wide Web. Absolutely, yeah. I found out that we've got some listeners to this podcast from Ireland. It's the only place off the out of North America that we've had some downloads. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if American radio just sounds different for them there.
Sure.
And they or maybe it's just somebody that used to live here that's now over there, and is tuning in because of the folks that I've interviewed so far. But this has by far been more fun than a
barrel of monkeys.
Barrel of monkeys. Than anything I could do on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I appreciate you coming down from Saratoga County in the rain and sitting here with us today. And no matter what you do, and if you think of any ideas to figure out how to, make this make money because, I'm not doing it for that.
Right.
I'm doing it mostly for the fun of it.
Right.
Some for the history of it,
Right.
I'm really, I don't know what I was thinking when I first started this. I probably should have sat down with some of the oldest people first because I would love to have had
Right.
Dick Wood in here.
Right.
And we just lost Dick last week.
And I never did get a chance to meet him. I
boy.
grew up, Dick was on in Providence for years, and
Yep.
my folks used to watch him.
Sure.
And then he moved up here, and I remember that one of the gatherings that you guys had was a dinner.
Yeah. Yep.
A couple of years ago, I guess it was.
He was
and
there.
I was going to go over and introduce myself, but he was in conversation with, I think, Doc Perriman.
Yeah,
And I didn't want to interrupt, and so I didn't do it.
Yeah. He would not have minded it at all, especially somebody from back in his home area. Yeah.
So may you rest in peace.
Absolutely. Again, thanks, Buzz. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Warren.
Radio Split Ranch.
Wait till I tell my kids I talked with someone who helped start MTV. I have reached a new status of cool in my family. And if you're keeping track of our running count of how many stations are represented by our 4 guests so far at the Radio Split Ranch, Buzz's 20 stops brings us to 47. If you're interested in that. I'm sure you've been wondering about the photo that accompanies my monthly podcast, and even if you haven't, I thought it might be fun to kind of dissect it for you so you understand what my mindset was at the age of about 14 when this photo was taken. This was a pine desk built into the end of our knotty pine paneled basement in our family home in East Glenville circa 1966 or so. Sitting on the desk on the left, looking a tad crooked, is the broken typewriter that I used for everything from homework to writing the neighborhood newspaper that had 2 or 3 editions, if I remember correctly, maybe circulation 4. Anyway, the reason the typewriter is propped up like that is that the belt that moved the carriage broke. I didn't know how to fix it, so I had to rely on gravity for the movement of the machine, the only science I really ever understood, gravity. Right above my neatly trimmed head is the 1958 edition of the Book of Knowledge Encyclopedia. Not sure how my folks afforded that, but it got us through our school years, pre-internet. To the right of that is my studio clock, which I attached to a piece of plywood with a hole in it so I could decorate around it. I remember that it was an old clock, and it made a bit of a motor noise that wouldn't be acceptable in a real studio. Directly under that hangs the iron lamp I made in junior high shop class. I wired it, but the shop teacher actually did the welding. At my elbow is the wooden mic stand that I made at my dad's nearby basement workbench. Behind that, you'll see one of the 2 3-inch reel-to-reel battery-operated tape recorders I had. The other tape recorder is the black one sitting on the desk to the right of my elbow. And behind that is one of the 2 45 RPM record cases that contain the station's record library. Some of the records were mine. Many were my younger brother's, much to his chagrin. The poor kid had to listen to my radio station to hear his own records. And he could do that thanks to the little light blue 1/4-watt radio transmitter from Lafayette Electronics sitting just below my handmade lamp there. You'll also notice a black 9 transistor radio sitting on the shelf next to the clock. I believe it was 9 transistor. I'd stepped up from 6 or 7. And below that, sitting on the desk, is a white toy walkie-talkie with telescoped antenna. I used to communicate with my nearby neighbor Mike with that. His name was Mike. Appropriate for, microphones at a radio station, I guess. So that's where my 51-year-old radio career was shaped, right there where I recorded my first audition tapes and my attempts at the age of 16 to get on any local radio station that would have me. By the way, I tell that story in my memoir, available through Amazon Books and Audible audiobooks, called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. You might want to check that out. Of course, now comes the time where I try to figure out what I, end each podcast with, an air check. I spent some time between the last episode and this one putting together a complete CD library directory of what I own. These are air checks from the last, 51 years or so. 50 years, just over 50 years that I was in the business, full and part-time. And I really couldn't find any particular station to pick on this particular time. So here's what we're going to do. I spent some time when my boys were I want to say 4 and 6 years old. Yeah, in that range somewhere. And we had 2 boys. We still do have 2 boys. And they did, I got them to do commercials with me when I was working at WGNA, program director, and also doing a lot of production at the time. I was even an off-air PD for a while, which gave me even more time to do production, which was cool. I really enjoyed it, and I had a lot of fun putting some of these together. So I thought I'd just play a few selections for you to kind of end it, since we've gone, once again, kind of long on this. And I don't want to bore you to tears, but I think you'll have some fun listening to my sons Ryan and Eric as they make their debuts in the commercials that aired on WGNA back in the early 1980s. Don't forget to join us again just before Christmas time for our next episode. In the meantime, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
Daddy's home.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey, Dad. Can we go bowling?
Gee, I don't know, son. It's a weekday, and all the leagues are bowling.
It's not 6 o'clock yet. And Bowling Green has open bowling every day until 6 o'clock.
Well, it is only 4:30. What about dinner, though?
Mommy says we can eat at Bowling Green. They have a nice restaurant, and I'm going to have a hamburger.
You know, Joe at the office was saying they have homemade soups and great sandwiches.
Yeah, and a bowling special, too.
A bowling special?
All we have to do is bring something that says GNA on it.
Something that says GNA on it.
And we get to bowl 2 games and get a third game free.
You mean free?
I mean free.
Only one problem, son. I really need some help with my bowling equipment. Everything's getting so old.
We can go to the pro shop, Dad.
The pro shop?
Sonny Doorstick is there, and he's a 20-year pro.
Where did you hear all
They
this?
talk about Bowling Green on GNA all the time. That's where the disc jockeys bowl every Monday night.
Okay, this is the one on Routes 9 and 20 Columbia Turnpike in East Greenbush, right?
That's right, Dad. You can drive. Since I started doing commercials for Amco Transmission, a lot of people have asked me how a 5-year-old can talk intelligently about cars when I don't even drive. Well, I watch and listen to my dad. He says Jim Ray Van Ness at Amco Transmission, 1025 Central Avenue, Albany, can see that you get your transmission repaired right. My dad, you know, he's smart. He even wrote this commercial for me. What's the matter, Dad?
Well, son, our car insurance just went up again, and last month it was our homeowner's insurance, and, well, just be glad you don't have to worry about such things yet.
Have you called the Gregson Agency?
The Gregson Agency? Where'd you hear about that?
The guy on the radio. He says the Gregson Agency can get you the best insurance deals, because they shop for their insurance through 30 different companies.
Is that right? How about our homeowners and other insurances?
The guy on the radio says Gregson handles auto, home, life, and even motorcycle insurance. Dad, can I have a motorcycle?
Maybe someday, son. Tell me more about Gregson.
Well, they do special insurance reviews so you can find out if you have the proper coverage or not.
And where did you say Gregson was located?
I didn't, but the guy on the radio says they got 2 locations now. In downtown Albany, right next to motor vehicles, and in Clifton Park on Route 146 at 146A.
You know, if you listen to me as well as you listen to that guy on the radio, I wouldn't have to yell half as much.
Daddy!
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
Yeah, what are you doing in Dwayne's Toyland?
Why, shopping for good little boys and girls like you, Ryan.
Eric, he knows my name. Yeah! But Cena, what about your elves?
Well, they're so busy, I need help from Dwayne's in Albany and Schenectady.
I know. My mom and dad shop here, too. They say this is where all the smart Santas shop. Yeah!
Have you been good boys this year?
Does July count? How about weekends?
Well, do you think Dwayne's Toyland has everything you'll want?
Yeah! I saw Legos, Transformers, Stompers, G.I. Joe, and Care Bears, too!
Did you send me your lists?
I did, but Eric doesn't know how to spell yet, so I helped.
Well, I know that with help from Dwayne's Toyland, you'll be really happy on Christmas morning.
Oh, do they deliver? Ryan!
All the smart Santas shop Dwayne's Toyland with 2 locations in Westgate Shopping Center, Central Avenue, Albany, and at 3109 State Street, Schenectady. Open daily 9:30 to 9:30, Sunday 10 to 5.